The rejection happened in a heartbeat, sharp and public, like a cup shattering on tile. The cafe line froze as the barista's smile thinned, and a card was slid back across the counter, declined in red letters that felt louder than any alarm. The woman at the register stood still, impeccably dressed, shoulders straight, eyes steady, yet something unseen cracked beneath her calm. In that ordinary moment, surrounded by steam and clinking cups, no one knew they were witnessing the first tremor of a life about to change. And no one noticed the single dad 2 steps back, holding a tired child's backpack strap, who was about to step forward without knowing why the world would never look the same again. If you believe in kindness, in second chances, and in the quiet power of doing the right thing when no one is watching, take a second to like, comment, share, and subscribe to this channel right now. Stories like this exist because people like you still believe they matter. The cafe was the kind that smelled like comfort and hurry at once, where commuters drifted in with heavy eyes and left with warmth in their hands. Morning light pressed through the windows, dust floating like slow snow. The woman at the counter adjusted her sleeve as if nothing had happened, as if decline did not mean denial, as if dignity could smooth over anything. She reached for her phone with a controlled grace that suggested a lifetime of managing outcomes, of never letting a single variable slip. The barista waited, uncertain, while the line grew restless. That was when the man behind her stepped forward, a soft urgency in his movement, the kind that comes from living on borrowed minutes. He was a single father, worn in the particular way responsibility wears a person down and builds them up at the same time. His jacket was clean but thin, his shoes scuffed from bus stops and school hallways. His mornings were measured in lunchbox checks and attendance bells, in the fragile math of making it work. He had not planned to intervene. He had planned to pay for a small coffee, to sit for 5 minutes before the day's grind began. But something about the woman's stillness, the way her hands paused as if deciding whether pride or practicality should move first, tugged at him. He paid without spectacle, setting his card down with a nod, asking that the order be covered as if it were the most natural thing in the world. He did not look at her face long enough to invite misunderstanding. He did not offer an explanation. He simply did what felt right and stepped aside, returning to his place as if nothing had happened. The barista exhaled, the machine hissed back to life, and the line moved on. In the currency of the morning, the moment was already spent. The woman turned, surprised, gratitude flickering across her features before being quickly tucked away behind composure. She thanked him with her eyes, with the smallest inclination of her head, and moved to wait for her drink. He busied himself with his phone, pretending to check messages that were mostly reminders and bills. He did not know that the woman he had helped ran a company that spanned cities, that her decisions shaped thousands of lives. He did not know that her card had been declined on purpose. For months, she had been testing the seams of her world. Power had insulated her, wealth had buffered her from consequence, and she had begun to fear that kindness offered to her was always transactional. So she had set traps for herself, small inconveniences designed to see what would happen when she was not recognized, when the armor of status was removed. The declined card was one of them, a deliberate pause to watch human nature unfold. Most days, people avoided her eyes. Some grew impatient. A few whispered judgments. Today, someone stepped in. As the cafe hummed back into routine, the single father gathered his drink and prepared to leave. His child's school was 3 blocks away, the bus schedule unforgiving. He slipped out into the street, the air sharp with winter promise, unaware that the woman watched him go with an intensity that surprised her. She had expected to feel validated or disappointed by her experiment. Instead, she felt unmoored. The help had been offered without curiosity, without leverage. It had been clean. Their lives would have drifted apart there, as most moments do, but the day had other plans. An hour later, the single father stood in a fluorescent office waiting room, the kind with outdated magazines and chairs that groaned when you sat too hard. He was there because the warehouse he worked for had been sold, because rumors had become notices, because he had been told to come in and hear his fate. The room smelled like carpet cleaner and anxiety. He thought of rent. He thought of school shoes. He thought of how to explain uncertainty to a child who trusted him completely. In another building across town, the woman sat at the head of a long table, the city unfurling behind her in glass and steel. Reports were stacked neatly, the day's agenda cease. Yet her mind kept returning to the café, to the man with the tired eyes who had not asked her name. She felt the pull of something unfinished. During a break, she asked for a list of the warehouse acquisitions finalized that quarter. Names blurred until one detail snagged her attention. The address was familiar. Too familiar. By afternoon, the single father learned what he had feared. The position would be eliminated. Severance was minimal. There were apologies that felt practiced. He nodded, thanked them, gathered his papers. Pride demanded composure even as his chest tightened. Outside, the sky had darkened, clouds gathering as if to mirror his thoughts. He walked to the bus stop, calculating and recalculating, trying to find hope in numbers that refused to cooperate. The call came as he sat there, a number he did not recognize. He almost let it go to voicemail, habit telling him unknown calls were rarely good news. But something urged him to answer. The voice on the other end was measured, professional, inviting him to an interview the next morning for a role that sounded too good to be true. He asked questions, careful not to hope too hard. The answers were clear. The opportunity was real. He arrived early the next day, hair still damp from a rushed shower, folder clutched like a lifeline. The building was sleek, intimidating. He felt out of place, a familiar sensation that had followed him since becoming a single parent, since life had narrowed and sharpened. When he was ushered into the room, the woman from the café was there, seated across from him, eyes bright with recognition. Understanding rippled between them without words, the air charged with the echo that small morning kindness. The interview was rigorous, fair, focused on competence rather than polish. She asked about his experience, his adaptability, his constraints. He answered honestly, refusing to oversell, grounded by the reality that honesty was all he had left. She listened in a way that made him feel seen rather than assessed. When it ended, he left with cautious optimism and a strange sense of having stepped into a story larger than himself. Days passed. He returned to the routines that anchored him, even as uncertainty hovered. Then the offer arrived, detailed and generous, structured with flexibility that acknowledged his responsibilities. The salary would change everything. The benefits would steady the ground beneath his feet. He sat at the kitchen table, letters spread before him, and allowed himself to breathe fully for the first time in months. He started the job and found a culture that valued quiet diligence. He worked hard, not to prove gratitude, but because it was who he was. The woman watched from a distance, careful not to let personal gratitude cloud professional judgment. She had learned something essential that morning and was determined not to cheapen it. Yet as weeks turned into months, their paths crossed in meetings and hallways, a mutual respect deepening into something warmer. They spoke of systems and improvements, of work-life balance, and what it meant to build something that lasted. They spoke, too, of children and mornings, and the invisible labor that holds lives together. The company changed in subtle ways. Policies softened without losing rigor. Programs were introduced to support parents, to recognize that people brought whole lives to work. Productivity rose, but so did loyalty. The woman found that leading with empathy did not dilute authority, it strengthened it. The single father found that stability allowed him to dream again, cautiously at first, then with growing confidence. One evening, Long after the building had emptied, they stood by the windows as the city lights flickered on. The day had been difficult, decisions heavy. The woman felt the familiar weight of responsibility press in, but it was tempered now by something steadier. She thought of the café, of the declined card, of how close she had come to learning the wrong lesson. The man beside her thought of the bus stop, of the phone call that had felt like a lifeline thrown across a widening gap. They shared the silence, comfortable and honest. Time continued its quiet work. The single father's child grew, laughter filling the apartment that no longer felt like a temporary shelter. The woman recalibrated her definition of success, measuring it not only in expansion but in impact. Their connection remained grounded, shaped by respect and shared values rather than grand gestures. They understood that what bound them was not the miracle of chance, but the discipline of choosing decency again and again. Years later, the cafe was still there, the same smell of coffee and hurry. The woman returned one morning, alone, standing in line as the barista greeted her. She paid with ease this time, the transaction smooth and forgettable. Yet she lingered, watching the door, remembering how fragile moments could be. Outside, people hurried past, each carrying their own quiet tests. If this story touched your heart, if it reminded you that small kindnesses can bend the arc of a life, please take a moment now to like, share, and subscribe. Your engagement helps stories like this find the people who need them most. Before we close, leave a comment telling us about a time when a simple act changed your day or your direction. Your words might become someone else's hope. The woman took her coffee and stepped into the light, resolved to keep choosing the harder good. Somewhere across the city, the single father walked his child to school, backpack bouncing, future wide open. They did not know who would be watching, who would be learning from the quiet echo of a decision made without expectation. But the world felt a little steadier because of it, and that was enough.